The BRRRR method, how you can get houses for very little to none of your own money. This is part 3 of a 4-video series breaking it down: how to buy houses using other people's money, renovate houses using other people's money, rent the property out, which we're talking about today, and then refinance and repeat. After the property is renovated, you have to go in and rent the house. So we're gonna walk you through this property. We're getting ready to rent it, how we find tenants, the process, the renovation, and all in between. So when you're renovating a property to keep as a rental, there's some things that you have to think about along the way during the renovation to maximize your cash flow when it's all said and done. Some things like, how many bedrooms can you fit into the house? Is there an opportunity to add a bedroom, maybe upstairs, maybe in the basement? Maybe you split a bedroom in half and turn it into 2 bedrooms, because bedroom count affects rent income a lot. The second thing is bathrooms. So are you gonna add a second full bathroom, or is there a way to add a half bathroom? When people go out and rent houses, bedrooms and bathrooms are a huge determinator if they rent those houses. Or maybe it's a Cape Cod or a 3-story house where you can go in and finish the attic and add more bedrooms and square feet. At the end of the day, square feet matters, but it's not really the end all be all. Bedrooms and bathrooms really matter. Then the condition of the property is thereafter. So I used to way over improve my properties. I would come into a kitchen and rip out all the cabinets if all they needed were paint. These cabinets were so bad we had to replace them, but replacing cabinets might cost you $3,000 or $4,000 when just painting the existing cabinets that are already there may cost you $700 or $1,000. Another thing that I screwed up on, putting in granite instead of Formica. I do granite in all my properties now, but there's times when you flip houses, you don't have to put granite in. Formica will do the job. But for me on rental properties, I keep granite in all the properties to harden the property so tenants can't damage them, and then I have to go in and replace them. In the kitchen, I used to do all stainless steel appliances. The problem with that is as soon as it gets dented, it looks terrible, it looks horrendous. So what we do now is we do black appliances, because the appliances are still nice, they're just not stainless steel, and I don't have to turn them over and replace them as much as I used to. Now I do have a friend that does not put kitchen appliances in his rental properties and says that he still gets top dollar even though the tenants have to bring in their own appliances. I don't do that. I've thought about doing it, haven't done it yet. I'm curious if you've heard of that. Comment below, let me know your thoughts on it. The flooring selection is very important. On the first floor living space, we always do luxury vinyl tile or luxury vinyl plank. What I used to not do is I used to put carpet upstairs and I used to put carpet on the staircase. What happens is over time, people going up and down to the bedrooms, they're gonna destroy the carpet and you're gonna have to go and you're gonna have to replace it every year, every 2 years. So what I do now, even though it costs me a little bit more on the front end, I always do hardwood on the living space, I do hardwood on the staircase, I do hardwood on the second floor, I do hardwood everywhere, because that means I don't have to go back later and spend more money on replacing it. So hardwood usually costs like twice as much to install, or LVT costs twice as much to install. So if you save 1 turnover, guess what? You just made your money back. But one thing I do want to warn you on, make sure you put in thick LVT, because I put the thin stuff in and I had to go back and replace it 2 years later. So the thicker it is, the longer it'll last. Right before you rent it out, you or somebody on your team has to do a final walkthrough and a final punch out, because last thing you want is for a tenant to move into the property and then a whole bunch of work still have to take place, and now the tenant's pissed off at you, which can turn into a horrible relationship. So do a final walkthrough. Here's some things that you have to check on your final walkthrough, meaning the contractor says, hey, I'm done. You go through and recheck all these things. First thing, please make sure that the AC and the furnace both work. They turn on and hot air and cold air comes out through the ductwork. Make sure that all doors fully close and fully open without getting caught on anything. Then you wanna run all the plumbing. You wanna turn the shower on full throttle, you wanna flush the toilets full throttle, and you wanna turn the sinks on full throttle, and let the water run to make sure that there's no leaks underneath. So check underneath and go to the first floor to make sure water's not running all the way down, through the floor, down into the floor beneath it. Second thing with the water, you gotta make sure it has both hot and cold water. So you gotta make sure the hot water tank is working as well. So test them both. Make sure hot and cold both come out of here. You also gotta make sure that you got smoke and carbon monoxide detectors that work. With the windows, you wanna make sure that there's screens on all windows. And then most times we don't put blinds in the windows. Sometimes if the tenants absolutely require them, we'll put them in, but if not, we're not gonna spend the money on it. Make sure that the light switches actually turn lights on, and make sure that the outlets actually work. We don't have appliances yet, because it's not rent ready, but if it was, come in, turn the appliances on, run water through them, turn the gas burner on, whatever you gotta do, make sure that they work, because most of the time contractors leave them unplugged and you don't want tenants to have to do that. So after you do all that, how do you actually find a tenant and rent a property out. Once a property is 100% ready to go, what we normally do is list it on Zillow.com. That's where the majority of our tenants come from. You can also list it on apartments.com. You can also post it in Facebook groups. You can even post it on Craigslist. We don't do that, but again, mass majority of our tenants come from Zillow. So we take pictures, we post it on Zillow.com. And what happens is, if you have a nice product, which this is, if it's in a decent location, like a real city, which this is, not way out in the country, and if it's priced even remotely according to the market, guess what? You're gonna get tenants that start calling you like this, like clockwork. You're gonna have 10, 20, 30, 40 people reach out in the first week. Most people's biggest concern is like, well, what if I can't find a tenant? That's literally been the least of my worries. It's like, how do we find more houses? How do we raise more money? How do we work with more contractors? Those are the things you gotta worry about. Tenants is literally the last thing you gotta worry about. If you have a solid project, priced accordingly, you'll get tenants, I promise. But remember this, if you're priced too high, think about it like this. If you let a property sit for 1 month at $1,200 a month because it's overpriced a little bit and tenants don't want it, that's the equivalent of renting it for $1,100 a month that year. Because you miss 1 month at $1,200, that's losing $100 a month. So you might as well cut the rent, move it to $1,100, get it rented so you can make up that cost. So once the tenant's interested, we'll show them the property, and if they want it, they'll have to fill out an application. What happens on the application is that their credit gets pulled, their background check happens, we look for evictions, we look for foreclosures, we look for anything that would turn us off from a tenant, right? So typically we require 3 times the monthly income to cover the rent. And there's a few other things in this, and we definitely don't want evictions or foreclosures, that's for sure. And I think it's a 620 or a 640 plus credit score. But once somebody checks all those boxes in the lease, here's a few things that you got to make sure that you have. The tenants pay for all utilities. So all utilities the tenants pay for. You don't even want to pay for water. There's a lot of landlords that still pay for water. Don't do it. Make the tenants pay for it. You want to make sure that there's no pets allowed. And if they do have pets, they're putting a non-refundable security deposit down and they're getting added to the monthly rent, an increase in the monthly rent. You also want to make sure that they cut their own grass because again, all that is another added cost to you. You also want to make sure that your lease has a no smoking policy. After the 1-year term on a lease with the tenant, once it goes month to month, you want to get them to either sign another year lease because that covers you to make sure that they're not moving out anytime soon. But if they want a month to month, that's fine, but you can increase and charge a premium on the rent so you can cover your side as well. If they do decide to leave, you've had a little bit of extra money to help cover a potential vacancy. So once that's all said and done and you get a tenant to move in, before they move in, you got to collect security deposit and first month's rent and maybe last month's rent, depending on the tenant and the terms and the location and all. Once you have that, they move in, now they start paying you rent, and you've checked off the rent section of the BRRRR method. Remember, this is video number 3 of a full series of each step of the BRRRR method. So just make sure you check out videos 1 and 2 in the description below. Make sure you hit that subscribe and like button as well so you can get the rest of the videos coming soon. Thanks.